Now, if I had to pick what character had the best story in the sequels, I'd say it was Kylo Ren or Ben Solo, pretty much hands down. Not that there was stiff competition or anything, and he also wasn't always the most consistent character. He might seem to want different things depending on who's writing him, but at least there was somewhat of an arc there, and some payoff with him at the end. In fact, I think the best scene in the sequel trilogy on the whole is easily the one in The Rise of Skywalker where he talks to his father again, where Ben begins to forgive himself and destroys Kylo Ren and returns to the light, punctuated when he throws his lightsaber into the sea. Not only was it a surprise, but a welcome one to see Harrison Ford again in the role, though he couldn't be bothered to cut his hair for it, but it was brilliantly acted by Adam Driver and was one of the few scenes in the sequels that had any sort of earned emotional punch or weight behind it. And even the setup for it, with Leia using the last of her strength to reach out through the Force to simply say Ben's name to try to reach her son one last time before she died, was pretty good considering how limited they were due to the passing of Carrie Fisher. They had to use leftover footage from the other movies and to basically patch it in there, and though not perfect, it was better than no Leia at all. But then there was the whole Force healing aspect of that scene or part of the movie, where Rey heals Ben's mortal wound. And sure, I think there's a debate that could be had that Force healing makes sense in Star Wars, that it could be an ability Jedi have. We've seen it before in the expanded universe and certainly in plenty of video games, where it's almost just a necessity. Though I'd argue the problem with making it an official part of the canon is it's one of those things that opens Pandora's box, if you will, just like hyperspace ramming. Once it gets done for the first time, you can't help but ask why it hasn't been done before. Why not use it in other situations where it certainly would have been handy? And I guess with Force healing, maybe you could say it was an extremely rare special ability possessed by only a very few, not just a skill any Jedi could learn. Something along the lines of psychometry, which we see used by Quinlan Vos, something that you either have or you don't have. And though that might not be a great explanation, it's still an explanation. But of course they couldn't just leave well enough alone. Apparently Rey's Force healing ability wasn't quite good enough as is, because according to a new book called Skywalker, A Family at War, it wasn't just Ben's body that Rey healed, but also his mind. And I'll quickly read the passage from the book now. Healing through the Force is a peculiar thing. Rey transferred her own Force energy to the wounded man at her feet. However, the interaction did more than merely mend a gaping wound. Burned flesh and damaged organs were made whole again, and even the scar on his face disappeared. For the first time in more than a decade, Ben Solo's mind cleared. Okay, so granted, this is pretty vague, and I'm going to guess or hope maybe it's more or less a throwaway line. Maybe the author didn't mean to imply that Rey had sort of scrubbed the dark side from Ben's mind, or started to, and then allowed him to think clearly again by using an ability that she possessed. Because something like that, being able to rid the dark side from someone's mind, would be about the worst thing they could ever add to the canon. Because one of the great things about Star Wars is it's always about the choices people make. Always. Yes, the dark side can influence and try to corrupt you, but it always comes down to an individual's decision. Lucas has even said it's about the good and evil in all of us and whether we choose to be selfless or selfish. Anakin Skywalker in Revenge of the Sith had a choice. He could stop Mace Windu and save Palpatine and potentially save the woman he loves at the risk of Palpatine maybe taking over the galaxy. Or he could let Windu kill Palpatine, risk the life of the woman he loves for the greater good, or to safeguard the galaxy from the Sith. And of course, the reason why Jedi don't form strong attachments, or are encouraged not to, is to avoid situations just like this one. Because it was choosing to save Palpatine that truly started his journey down the dark path. Though maybe the greatest irony in all of Star Wars is that many years later, Anakin or Vader would be in a very similar situation again while watching his son be killed by Palpatine, and he ultimately makes the same choice that he did back then. He again chooses family or someone he cares about, but this time it brings him back to the light, which, as I've said before, was such a wasted potential for the sequel trilogy to explore something meaningful to Star Wars. Just what is the right path for the Jedi? But anyway, getting back to it, yes, Anakin Skywalker was manipulated by Palpatine for years and years, but he couldn't literally make him fall to the dark side. The dark side wasn't some type of contagion continuously implanted in Anakin's mind by Palpatine until he finally fell. Instead, it's actually something that is always there in everybody, something that one can either choose to embrace or reject, which was actually beautifully shown in a Clone Wars episode with Yoda in Season 6, where he faces and accepts that the dark side is a part of him, but that he will not embrace it. So the thing about the dark side, though again it can try to corrupt you or someone can manipulate you with it, it's still something that you have to choose, something you grow and cultivate within yourself due to the actions you take. It's something that oftentimes or usually gives you power or something else you desire at a price. It's essentially an addiction, and I think that's by far the best way to look at the dark side. It's something you can use to get the desired results quickly and easily, and something you think you can control, but that will ultimately control you. And with it, like with an addiction, you may even know you're spiraling out of control, but it's so hard to stop yourself. Kylo even says in The Force Awakens that he feels the pull to the light, which is maybe some part of him screaming out that he doesn't want to be like this, but he just cannot stop or help himself. And I'm sure most addicts have those moments of clarity where they feel that pull to the light and would give anything to break the addiction, but usually they can't. That's what the dark side is. It's a trap. It gives you everything you want, but takes everything you are and have in exchange. And I'm sure every addict wishes beating it was as simple as someone waving a hand in front of their face and healing their mind and taking the desire for whatever they were addicted to away. And though in the real world, sure, that would be great. It could help a lot of people. It also makes it more powerful, though, when someone does beat their addiction, knowing they finally overcame it. And sure, they may have had help, they likely did, but it was still their accomplishment. And in a story like Star Wars that you want people to relate to, you really don't want to imply the dark side is something that can just be taken away from you or scrubbed from a person's mind by someone else. The same way you don't want to imply that someone can corrupt another person enough to turn them without them being able to have anything to say about it or way to stop it. In Star Wars, you always want the choice to either embrace the dark side or to reject it or to finally turn away from it to be meaningful and powerful. You always want these characters to have agency over these actions so we can connect with those choices and feel like we have agency in our own lives. I mean, imagine for a moment how different and awful the end of Return of the Jedi would be if Anakin turns back to the light because Luke just took away the dark side from his mind by using some sort of Jedi power that he had. Instead, what turns Anakin back to the light is Luke's unwavering faith in his father, faith Anakin doesn't even deserve to have. Though I believe the turn back to the light starts in The Empire Strikes Back for Anakin, when Luke essentially chooses death over the dark side and lets himself fall. When Anakin, or Vader, whoever he is at that moment, sees his son, that he would rather potentially fall to his death than be like him. And so even subtly implying that Rey cleared Ben's mind, that she purged the dark side somehow, shows a lack of understanding of Star Wars and makes the story worse. Though like I said, maybe it's a throwaway line from the author that she didn't really think about, because it's an otherwise fine book for the most part. But that's a line that really should have been caught by someone else in the story group or whoever proofreads these things to make sure they're good to go and make sense for the galaxy, and just for the general idea behind Star Wars. And yes, I know it's one line in one book, and a lot of people will say, who cares, or just let it go. And that's fair enough. Others will say something like the sequel trilogy is worthless anyway, or it's not canon or whatever, so why do I even care? And no, I'm obviously not a huge fan of the sequels, but the reason for that is because I don't think the people who wrote it truly understood Star Wars. They may have got it on the surface, but they missed the deeper meanings. And it's just kind of sad that when they try to do things to fix the sequels or make them better, and this book is a worthy idea and effort to do that, to present the story of the Skywalkers in this way, but they still manage to bungle something up. Well, that's all I've got for this time. Now it's your turn to tell me what you think about all this. And I know, probably making a big deal out of nothing, but I always like to take an opportunity to talk about and discuss what I think makes Star Wars truly great beyond all that cool surface level stuff that we all love. So anyway, do leave a comment below and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.